one.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the September 8th meeting of the Board of Appeals regarding the 485-487 Blue Hill Parkway for the so-called Ice House application. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With us this evening, Board of Appeals members Virginia Donahue King and Brian Conley. My notes indicate that at least part of the purpose of the meeting this evening is to hear the peer review testimony of Sean Reardon of Tetra Tech, excuse me. Mr. Brodsky, is there, you going to make any further presentations, or how do you want to proceed after we hear from Mr. Reardon?
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Good evening. My name is Adam Brodsky. I'm an environmental and land use lawyer with Drowan, Tacho, and Morgan, and I represent the applicant, 485-487 BHP Trust, LLC. And would it be helpful, sir, if I just briefly introduced the team again?
Yeah, if you'd like to, sure, feel free.
Just very quickly, Charlie Bosworth and Paul Driscoll on behalf of the LLC. Michael Joyce, our professional engineer. Katya Poziadlo is our landscape architect.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. She's in the waiting room.
Yep, she's coming in now.
And Chris Valeka, who is our architect, is apparently on final approach from Logan Airport and will be with us shortly. And Mr. Leonard, we're prepared to make a short presentation regarding the proposed changes that were made in response to the peer review. And I don't know whether you want to hear that first or whether you'd like to hear Mr. Reardon first this evening.
Well, I think it may be best if we hear from you as to the changes that were made, and then Mr. Reardon can act as cleanup.
Thank you. We were going to begin with our architect, but he has yet to join us and will join us momentarily. So with that, if I can ask Michael Joyce to go through the civil plans and explain to you the changes that have been made, and then perhaps we can have Katya Poziadlo take you through the landscape plan. So, Mike?
Hello, Michael Joyce with Joyce Consulting Group. I'm just going to share my screen here, if that's all right. So prepare, show the proposed plans.
Sure, that's fine, Mr. Joyce.
Okay.
Welcome to the Board of Appeals again.
Thank you. Okay, so as you're all familiar, this is 485-487 Blue Hills Parkway. I'm just going to go over a brief. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty and go over the presentation again, but I do want to show the existing conditions plan real quick and show that since we last met, we've updated the existing conditions plan to provide additional topography outside of within 10 feet of the property line on the abutting properties in order to make sure that we have an overall plan that blends with the abutting properties. In addition to that, we've also had the wetlands flagged by a professional wetland scientist. So those resource areas are updated. Those are the two main changes we made to the existing conditions plan. There were also some utility information added, things of that nature. As we move on to the site layout plan, this is where a significant number of changes have been made through the import of the Board of Appeals, as well as the import of the review engineer. Mainly the landscape islands on the upper parking lot were expanded. Those are both now 10 feet in width. Before we had two smaller landscape islands. I think they totaled approximately 8 to 12 feet in width. So we've about doubled the size of those landscape areas, landscape islands, to provide for significant plantings. And Katya from Verdant Landscape will get into that more when she presents her plan. In addition to that, we've also removed, there was a retaining wall here that kind of separated the driveway coming in to the north and the parking area. That's been removed, and we've been able to address that with grading, which I think presents a overall better picture of the site, and helps with the flow and line of sight throughout the site. In addition to that, one of the major things we added was a fire access around the entirety of the site. So you come in and there's a 20-foot aisle around the entirety of the building. This was something that was requested by by Tetra Tech, and we agree that it provides for better circulation and also better emergency access as well. And in doing that, we're able to add 19 spaces to the rear of the building, which I know parking has been voiced as a concern in the past. In addition to those 19 spaces, we've added 6 spaces in the rear here, and those will be dedicated to the new trail that will access Pine Tree Brook. So those will be posted as parking for access to Pine Tree Brook. So they won't be utilized by the residents, but by people utilizing Pine Tree Brook. In addition to that, we've also added pedestrian access from the building to Blue Hills Parkway in this area here. Before there was no pedestrian access. That this provides a better project as well. I think many of those concerns were heard at the last zoning board hearing, or the first one. I wasn't at the last one, but the last one that we discussed the civil site layout information on. In addition, so those are kind of the main site layout changes. There was also a community area added in the rear, which is better displayed on the landscape plan. That was also something that I know that the board was relatively passionate about, adding some community space, outdoor space. So here we are moving on to the utility and grading plan. The stormwater design changed fairly significantly, although it functions in the same spirit as it did prior. Instead of having a large storage infiltration chamber system below the upper parking lot, we've moved all of the stormwater retention to a larger basin at the rear, which basically that's kind of how the site functions now. Everything flows to the rear of the lot, then ultimately off into the wooded area. So that's what we're proposing to do. We're capturing the upper parking lot area with catch basins as well as the northern driveway. The remainder of the site is sheet flowing to the rear to the sediment forebay. Then we'll overflow to the stormwater retention area and ultimately overflow through an outlet control structure to the wooded area. During all storm events, there'll be a reduction in the rate of runoff. And it provides for easier maintenance. So you can just purely look at a stormwater retention area and inspect it. It's a lot more difficult to inspect, as you know, subsurface chambers. So I think overall this was also an added plus for the project. Those are really the main changes that were made from a civil site layout perspective. I would like to hand it off to Katya at this time to present the landscape plan.
Well, let me just ask you, excuse me, let me ask you one question. Whether it's appropriate at this stage, since we've done civil engineering through you, to hear from Mr. Reardon, so we're being consistent with the topics of discussion. Mr. Reardon, do you think it's best that you be heard next?
Yeah, I think it'd be good, and I'll be pretty short because I think Mike and the team have done a really good job of addressing almost all of my concerns. I have a few outstanding items, I would say, rather than concerns. They're all things that could probably be handled in a final plan or in their notice of intent application. First among them is, we'd asked for a water and sewer memo, just sort of to lay down the justification for what the new demands are and why the system out there can serve the needs. Still don't have that. And again, it's not because we think there's any issues. It's just that we typically like to give something to the board to give them a foundational basis to make the decision that there's adequate water and sewer supply. Probably an easy lift at some point, but I would suggest conditioning that at some time. We still have probably some really minor sort of bookkeeping issues with the stormwater design, but absolutely, it's really, really well done right now. Super, super robust, very easy to maintain. Really kind of a throwback to when things were much simpler than most of your systems out there now. So very, very happy with those changes. I did have a question on some of the striping and signage. I didn't quite understand why there was a do not enter striping at the back of the building. But what we'd like to do is see maybe in a final plan, get that clarified a little bit better with some directional arrows on the pavement and maybe some one-way signage or do not enter signage. But we didn't quite understand why the do not enter striping was in the back. By then it's kind of too late to tell people they can't come back there. So just looking for that to get changed. And then we just don't have I don't think we have a lighting plan yet. So I don't know if that was in the works, but that was pretty much all my remaining concerns.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Reardon. Let me, before we move on to landscaping or other issues, let's stay on the engineering path. And Mr. Connolly, do you have any questions of Mr. Joyce or Mr. Reardon?
Yes, and this, I'm not sure if this is landscape or civil, but Sean was just hitting on this. Just want to understand the driveway. The plans made me think that with the do not enter sign, the goal was to maybe have emergency access, maybe trucks only be making this loop. But I think from your memo, Sean, you're suggesting that it should be a counterclockwise loop so that all cars that continue past the main parking lot would loop around the building. So
I would think so, yes.
I don't know if Mr. Joyce, do you have could you clarify what the plan is? How are you guys envisioning it working?
Yeah, so our thought was that the do not enter was really intended for traffic, for basically the resident traffic. We were hoping to maintain this aisle here on the southerly side as a delivery access, like maintenance kind of access area. So the do not enter was really intended for pedestrians, residents and traffic, residential traffic coming and parking in the rear. The intent was to have them exit out and really maintain this northern curb cut as the point of access for the development, with the southern curb cut having reduced traffic, mainly, like I said, for deliveries and access, and then obviously for fire access as well.
Mike, how wide is that aisle?
On the southerly side,
On the northerly side?
that's 20, let me see here. Let's zoom in.
It would probably need to be at least 22 feet if it's going to be two-way traffic, so.
Okay, yeah, and we can.
Oh, it says 20 feet. Yeah, that's why I thought it was one way, because 20 feet was sort of the minimum for fire access.
Sure.
But either way, it's not going to be a heavy volume move. So I'm not terribly concerned about it, but it would need to be a little bit wider if it was going to be two-way.
Yeah, and we can certainly do that.
I mean, that seems a better approach to me, right? You probably don't want cars, driving outbound right along the facade of the building. Also, it's getting right up against your neighbor's property line. And so if it's great that you've solved it for public safety vehicles and deliveries. That's a great improvement. But I think I would agree, Mr. Joyce, what you were saying, if you can design it to address the concern Sean just raised about the width, my sense that probably is a better way to handle traffic in and out.
Sure, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
And what I'd suggest, Mike, is that 24 feet might be is typical, but it might be a bit too wide given the space that you have there. So 22 feet, I think, would work fine. It's just a bit more than the 20, but a big difference in terms of having two cars passing each other.
Sure, yeah, and on the northerly side, we have a bituminous berm. So if we can get the 22 plus the foot of berm, I think we might be in good shape. But if we can make it 4, I'll do 24. Just depends on the grading between the parking area and the drive aisle there.
And would you have signage that says, trucks only, or, public safety vehicles only, something to that effect to dissuade cars from making the loop?
Yeah, we certainly can. We have a signage sheet here. I'm not exactly sure if we have those included.
Maybe actually, Sean, that's probably your point, right? Is a plan that shows kind of signage and directional arrows and whatnot. I think that's
Yeah.
actually one of the requests you made. So that would be helpful.
Painted arrows help quite a bit.
Yeah. So we can stripe it up and kind of expand upon. We do have on our signage sheet, service entrance only, but we can also add striping and kind of make it more clear. Certainly.
Oh, I missed that, Mike. My apologies.
Yeah, that's no problem. That's like you said, arrows on the ground usually does a lot more than signage. So.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. King, do you have any questions of Mr.
I
Rubin?
did, but the last discussion helped me out on that, so I don't have any further questions.
Okay, I don't have any further questions. I don't know whether Tim Serwinski is present. Is Tim present for this hearing?
Yes.
I'm here, Mr. Chair. No questions from me. But I will be making sure that town staff are kind of reviewing these final plans. And if they have any further comments, they'll be submitting them. My suspicion is that they'll want to look at any proposed conditions and kind of offer their commentary in that form. But everyone's looking at these plans, and if anything comes up, I'll make sure it gets to the board.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that very much.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more? I guess, so I think Tim's comment about town review maybe is timely my other question. Sean, I noticed in your memo that you were suggesting coordination with the with Milton Fire Department.
Yep.
Maybe this ties in. I'm not sure if this belongs in the architecture design section of this meeting, but I guess I'd like to understand, how do we close that loop? Will we get some sort of letter or report from the fire department or some sign off from the fire department? But I think I'd like to know that the fire department is comfortable with the garage design. And I wasn't sure if you were flagging that as housekeeping or an open question, but I'd like your thoughts on how the board should resolve that one.
Well, the good news is the fire chief and the fire department usually get what they want in the end. They have a way of doing that. So the board doesn't have to worry too much about that, but we usually like as a matter of course to make sure that they're comfortable with the circulation, to make sure that they're comfortable with the access to below grade parking, because below grade parking can sometimes be a little bit of a hairy situation. In this particular application, I think there's only 30 spaces below the building, which means they're probably not going to have to go too deep into the building. Like for example, if the entire L was underground parking, we'd want to make sure there was a pretty good conversation between the fire chief and the applicant to make sure that the applicant's planning to get the access to the below grade parking that the fire chief would want. But I still think it's not a bad idea to ask for something on the record from the fire chief saying that he's okay with what's being proposed.
Yeah. And so Tim, is part of your review with, the various town departments, do you have the fire department review the plans?
Yes. And so Chief Madden has seen these plans. I haven't heard anything from him, but I can specifically flag that issue for him and just let him know that the board wants some kind of affirmative statement. I don't want to speak for him. He can speak for himself, but I just my experience from other reviews of other 40B projects, I don't think they tend to send trucks into a garage. So it's more of a matter of, can they get some guys with equipment and hoses in? Obviously very important that that's able to happen, but I know that that's often at times a question. And in the past, he said that, they'll get their truck as close as they can and then kind of get in through other means. But I'm writing a note to myself right now to tomorrow morning, send Chief Madden a note and just let him know that the board would like a kind of an affirmative statement on the circulation plan.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
And
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
it would help to have, and I don't know if I missed this one too, but it would help to have a parking layout for the lower level. And if there are going to be electric vehicle charging stations, that's something the fire department would probably want to know about where those are going to be. And below grade, I mean, in the garage.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Bev, do we have any person present at this hearing who has any questions of our engineers?
Not that I can see.
Okay. Then, Mr. Brodsky, do you want to move on to landscaping?
Mr. Leonard, Mr. Valeka has joined us, but he may be in the attendees portion, so I don't know if you can promote him as a.
Okay, so
panelist.
let me see what I can't see the attendees right now. Hold on.
Mike, we might need you to stop sharing your screen for just a minute.
Yeah, I think that's what we need. That's wonderful. Thank you. Who did you say is? Oh, here we are.
Thank you. And my suggestion, Mr. Leonard, if appropriate, would be to have Chris speak next and then Katya at the end. But just a point of information, we did submit a lighting plan several months ago, and in fact, it's posted on the town's website. So Mr. Reardon may have just not seen it yet, but we did present that.
Adam, unless he's calling in, I don't have anybody as an attendee.
I believe he may just be calling in.
That be a 401 number?
Yes,
So thank you.
That's what I'm seeing.
thank you.
And Chris is calling in, but he's muted for some reason. So
I've asked him to unmute.
I think I just got unmuted. I feel like I've been graduated as a citizen. Fantastic. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
I think we can hear you well, and welcome back to Boston.
It was a little bumpy flight there for a little while, courtesy of our fine friend Elsa. But I'm unfortunately going to be able to get a computer. I'm actually at the TSA conference room, which I renovated a couple of years ago, and I made friends, so they allowed me to come on in and use their facility. So I'm happy to be back in Boston and happy to be amongst you folks. So
Well, that's glad you're not in custody. That's important.
well, not yet. Not yet. Depends on how this conversation goes, and I think you guys might have some sway to have some detention abilities on me. So hopefully I don't rankle any nerves. I don't have access to the screen, but I don't have access to the screens. But I was going to spend just a few minutes and go over some of the changes that were made to the design in response to the last meeting we had together.
Well, I'm sorry for interrupting you, Chris and Mr. Leonard. I believe that the parking layout for the interior of the building is actually what's being displayed now. And so Chris can't see that, but I know that there's a question regarding a need for that parking layout.
Yeah, we have the parking layout. We show 34 spaces, and in direct response to the last meeting, we actually did research on the bicycle recommendations for residential facilities in Boston vicinity. Used it as a guideline, and we were able to show and fit a space in for bicycle storage inside the building, in addition to the bicycle storage area that was proposed on the outside of the building. I believe we have a capacity of 36 bicycles for the residents, which exceeds the requirements, or I should say the recommendations per the documents that we were able to do research on. The bicycle storage is a lockable space down in the lower area by the mechanical, electrical, and the tenant storage area, where we have a tenant storage area. And if I can follow up the conversation on the fire department, we have the required egresses as necessary that are also fire protected in a location that is protected by an NFPA 13 sprinkler system. So we invite the fire marshal to take a look at this, but this is definitely in keeping with the care and life safety that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the fire department will be looking for, and we look forward to having conversation with them as we start tapping flow tests and things like that, and keeping them involved as the process continues. The as far as the lower area, we are exposed on one side, which will mitigate the need for carbon dioxide systems to be put inside there. There will be a small amount of makeup heating, but everything else that's inside there is going to either be antifreeze glycol or dry sprinkler systems. So weather will not be effect down in the lower spaces. We do have a series of trench drains planned to go inside there that will be designed as the project proceeds, and that's going to allow to capture any snow that people bring in as part of the vehicles being parked. The exterior of the building, we updated the renderings to best reflect the revised civil drawings as well as the wonderful design that was put forward by the landscape architects. So we're going to see a much more bucolic landscape. Inside there, we can also see that we have made sure that the bicycle racks and the electric charging vehicle stations have been located as well. There are 2 electric vehicle charging stations, which will accommodate up to 4 vehicles in the public area that is in the very close to the front of the commercial side of things. And we looked at in conversations with Cliff, the architect who was consulting on behalf of the town, we gave more of a residential scale to the entry of the commercial space, because that's the side that's going to be closest to Blue Hills Parkway. And in doing so, we reduced the scale of that and took into consideration the concerns the board had regarding the mechanical units, which may or may not be located up on the roofs. The upper roof of the interior side, that's the 4-story side, that all along has had a series of parapet walls. The shingles that rise up go up beyond the proposed roof and acts as a screen, approximately 36 to 42 inches high, that will screen any view of any of the slim cassettes that would be up there for air conditioning. The lower roofs, which terrace down, we eliminated the kind of the mansard, the false mansard, and extended up a coffered parapet wall to go around those 3 sides, which will not only soften the exterior of the building and keep it in context with the rest of the district, as well as be amenable to the historic preservation district, but it also allows to screen off anything that is located up there from any passerbys down below. So we think that this is definitely a step in the right direction. And we were pleased to update the renderings to reflect that.
Have you completed your presentation, Mr. Valicka?
Well, I did, yes.
Okay, great. Let's see if our board members have any questions. Mrs. King, do you have any questions of Mr. Valicka?
No, I don't.
Okay, Mr. Connolly, please.
Just wonder if Mr. Reardon's review covered any of the topics that Chris just covered, and any feedback, Sean, on these points?
No, I think most of those are in
Cliff's letter, yeah.
Yeah, the only
Yeah.
thing I'm not seeing, and I don't know, I know, Adam, that there was an older lighting plan. I don't know if it's been updated for the most recent changes, but again, I don't see any lighting or anything like that in the rendering. So just don't want to make sure it doesn't get forgotten. That's all.
No, I mean, I think looking at, these new renderings and the site plans, and looking forward to turning to the landscape in a minute, which I've looked at, it just seems like the applicant's been very responsive to the feedback from the peer review team and from the questions we were asking at prior meetings. So it's really encouraging.
All right, let me, Bev, just as a bit of caution, Does Tim or any other person present at the meeting virtually have any questions of Mr. Valeka's presentation?
With the screen up, I can't see any hands. So, but
So-
I believe it can speak if, without me, if
Okay.
you would allow,
Can you see the screen now?
I can. And there are no hands.
Okay, great.
No comments from me, Mr. Chair, except I think this project is really, really come along. It looks nice.
Great, thanks, Tim. We appreciate it very much. Mr. Brodsky, you want to go on to landscaping?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Katya, it's all yours now, please.
Thank you very much, everybody. My name is Katya Posadlo, principal at Verdant Landscape Architecture in Brookline. Happy to be here tonight. And happy to share our landscape plan finally. I'm going to try to be short and sweet so we can get to your comments and questions. Don't mean to jump over anything, so interrupt me if you want more information or, ask afterwards, either way. This is our landscape plan, which has just recently been updated and which was sent to you earlier today, I believe. So the previous one that you have in your packets, probably from a week or two ago, has been updated, and this is the current one that we're showing you now. We updated it from the previous version as a result of some comments that we had received back from Steve Ivis, the conservation agent in town, regarding ensuring that we include only native species of plants. So this new plan now reflects that the plantings will be 100% native within the jurisdiction of those wetland buffers that Steve is reviewing. And the plant list has been updated, et cetera. So nothing else has changed on our plan from your packet, except that the plant species have been revised slightly to reflect those changes. So I'm just going to jump in. Our primary residential amenity area that was alluded to before is in that rear yard space behind the building. To the top of the page there, you can see there's a lot of green space back there toward the rear of the site, which is a really nice quiet area, of course, next to the conservation land. So it'll provide for really good amenity space for the people who live here. And in the left-hand side of that green space, you can see that little patio area that we're developing and have designed with some seating and a picnic table for gathering. And it's adjacent to a lawn area that would be available for flexible play. And that's adjacent to the larger, kind of slightly darker green space, which is the detention area by the civil engineer, which we are proposing to have seeded with an erosion control seed mix of all native plants. We also show a small patio out at the front, as you'll notice, related to the retail or commercial space at the front of the building, which really helps activate the streetscape and includes an accessible walkway to connect to the existing sidewalk. Unfortunately, it's not completely direct access from the sidewalk straight to the front door. Because we have a grade change, we needed to extend the sidewalk and make it a little bit longer. But fortunately, we didn't need to insert some sort of ramp system. It's just a sloped walkway, so there don't need to be any handrails. I just want to touch on circulation a little bit. We've provided ample sidewalks and walkways for the residents to get around the site as well. So there's a clear front walkway from that public sidewalk to the front lobby entrance. If you could point that out, Mike, that'd be great. I don't know if everyone can see his cursor. Yeah, that's the front door there. And then there's a second walkway out the back of the lobby to the back of the site, so residents can have clear walkway to that amenity space, that patio. And as was also mentioned, we've incorporated a trail connection and parking for 6 cars for that public trail to the conservation area in that right rear corner of the green space. And all the paving materials in this rear zone are proposed to be permeable. Permeable unit pavers at the patio and crushed stone at the trail parking area, so that we're not contributing to impervious surface calculations and increasing stormwater storage requirements. Now moving over to the planting plan and the general theme of the plantings, we have several goals for the planting plan. Number one, to create a really welcoming retail area, including that patio that I mentioned, with a real pleasant planting plan that includes ornamental grasses, hardy perennial plantings around it, Another goal was to support the residential component of the project, of course, with plantings around the parking lot and the building, as well as around that amenity area. And the last goal was to improve the streetscape. You can see those 4 trees planted along Blue Hill Parkway, which we're proposing as tulip trees. These are really beautiful, large. It's one of my favorite large shade trees. It grows fairly quickly, and they're actually species that were also recommended by Denny Swenson. So we're happy to include them along the streetscape there in the easement that already exists. We've also included some trees within the parking area, as was mentioned, to provide some shade throughout that space in those enlarged tree islands. And then at the back of the parking lot, you can see a row of trees. Those are serviceberry trees, which are sort of like a glorified tree. It's really more like a large shrub. And it's a native as well. And that'll help complement the architecture there. Along the left side, where we abut a residential neighbor, we're showing a row of arborvitae trees to help buffer that zone in between the driveway and that property. And then finally at the rear, as I mentioned, the patio is going to have a really beautiful backdrop of native shrubs and perennials to help blend it back into the conservation area. So it's not a formal planting with everything lined up in little rows. It's going to feel like a blend planting that's more native and natural in its character. On a final note, I think I'll point out that there's a few remnant existing granite slabs on site, which we wouldn't want to just kind of like throw to the side. So we're proposing to stockpile them and then reuse them as seating elements or benches around that patio area in the back. I think that'll add a cool character and also sort of natural materials in that zone work together well with the native plantings. So I think that's what I wanted to share initially. So now, unless Adam or others have further information to add or something I've forgotten, we'll welcome your comments and questions. There are a couple more pages to my landscape plans, but they're just illustrations or photographs of the proposed plantings, which we don't need to go through if you, you may want to if you want, but it's up to you. I've covered what I need to, I think, for the moment.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Let's go to Mrs. King. Do you have any questions regarding landscape plan or?
Well, I'm very happy to see the native plants in there and kind of the serendipitous use of the slabs and so forth. So I think it looks more mature now. I don't mean that the trees are bigger and I'm expecting everything to be like that, but it looks more like something that's established and wants to be there for a long time. So I like that.
Great, thanks, thanks, Jenny. Brian Connolly, please.
Chair, yeah, I agree. This is really keeps improving since the initial filing. So thanks for all of your work on this. A couple things I just want to make sure I understand. So in terms of the buffer from the neighbor to the south, am I reading this right that there's going to be a 6-foot stockade fence on the property line? I'm probably thinking about headlights now in particular with the drive aisle. And then is there also a screen of arborvitaes? I think it says where possible, and I just want to make sure I understand, where is it not possible? Is it a plan to have a full string of arborvitaes or any more description there would help?
That's a good question. The space provided between the curb and the property line is fairly narrow. So there are a few existing trees along that property line that we are hoping to save, but they're not represented on this plan because they weren't all included on the survey, the initial survey that we had. So maybe, I'm not sure if that updated survey that you did, Mike Joyce, might include a couple more of those existing trees along the property line. The point we were making here is that with the installation of the driveway alignment in this proposed configuration, some of those trees will need to be removed, but some may be able to remain, in which case we wouldn't cut them down, of course. But the plan is to pretty much infill as much as possible, like 4 feet on center with the skinny variety of arborvitae. There's a couple. You can do emerald green or you can do DeGroote spire to provide more than just a 6-foot buffer, but they get very tall. They get 15, 20 feet tall, so that there'll be an evergreen buffer. But if there's already a large tree there, of course, we're not going to replace it.
So
Or
is
need
it,
to replace it.
right, so one reason you wouldn't have, so I look at your plans and it looks like a constant string of arborvitaes without any real gaps. So I think one thing you said is, look, if there's a tree, we're gonna preserve the tree and not, not have.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that makes sense. You mentioned something about curbing. Is there a curbing reason why you wouldn't be able to run the arborvitaes as you've shown them on the plan? Did I
No,
hear that wrong? Something about being narrow back there? No, okay.
you just see the space allowable for that. It's like 3 feet wide. So we'll be planting them between the back of the curb and the fence.
Okay.
And there's ample room to plant these skinny evergreens there.
Okay, got it. So, except in the case where there's an existing tree, there'll be a continuing, set of
That's right.
arborvitaes alongside, and there is a stockade fence too. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. That helps me understand that. And then for the detention basin in the back, where it's the darker shade of green that says, erosion control mix. Like, how does that interact with the uses next to it? Is there a fence around that, or is that something you can walk partially across? What does that look like?
Also, good question. You can walk across it when it hasn't rained within 72 hours. So correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, Joyce, chime in if you think I'm misstating something, but there would not be standing water in that. It would appear like a meadow almost. And it would only need to be cut down or mown once a year, perhaps, or maybe cleaned out if there's some accumulation of silt from the flow of water into it from off the surfaces of the parking lot. So it would appear like a meadow, and it wouldn't need to be mown, while the adjacent lawn space would be mown. So it would be a clear division about where you're supposed to go play your ball or whatever. And sure, the ball might bounce into the the detention area, and if it rained 2 hours before, there might be a little puddle at the bottom, but it's meant to drain within 72 hours. So there would not be standing water, and it does not require a fence around it because of that. And it's not a steep slope down into it.
It looks like this, great wide green area that just has this very little narrow path that lets you get into it, if I'm looking at this right. And so I was wondering why that like neck of the erosion comes all the way to the south. I'm guessing you're going to say because it needs to collect the stormwater that comes off the parking area.
Yeah, exactly. That's my understanding. And Mike Joyce, maybe you can explain a little bit more about the flow of water and how water gets in there.
Yes. So in the back part and in the southern part of the parking area, we decided to do a kind of a surface flow collection. So it's a slight swale which will direct the stormwater towards the forebay, and that ultimately overflows into the sediment basin. I guess we could grass some of it. You'd still want that swale type topography in order to get it towards the retention pond. But
yeah, I mean, I guess this is just defer to Sean, I guess, and you as engineers, but it looks like Nadia's designed this nice fire pit that's hard to get to. And I was wondering if you really needed the entirety of that stretch of detention basin that kind of makes it harder for you to get back to that area. Maybe you do. I don't know, but I was curious if you looked at whether you needed to have it extend all the way down there.
Yeah, I can definitely take a look at that, and potentially we could provide a larger access to the fire pit area.
And Brian, if I could add, the narrow section along the parking lot, that's a generally flat, shallow slope, shallow like swale.
Yeah.
So it's definitely mowable and traversable on foot. So it's really that back rectangle that's the deeper element.
Yeah.
So really the whole parking edge is walkable and maintainable.
Okay. Yeah. It'd just be a shame. It's like such a beautiful space in the back corner. You would, it's hard for me to honestly to kind of picture it looking at this plan, and you hope it's not something that has, water detention uses, which aren't as attractive, kind of, separating you from the nicer amenity in the back. But
I think
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point is to create an area that is a little more removed and a little bit more natural, even though, yes, it has this adjacent lawn where, more typical ball play or game, whatever
Yeah.
can happen for residents. But I don't think the point is to have access from the parking lot directly into the space, because we have a clear walkway. I think we want to define where people go in. And once they're in there, it's not a narrow walkway. Maybe in the context of the 19 parking spaces and drive aisle, it might look, in plan view, it might feel that way. It's not going to feel narrow at all. And I think it's a nice entry point to the amenity space. So I don't think you need to provide another path through. And if people walk through, it's not a problem, because it's just like a little meadow, or, it's like someone's backyard if you happen to not mow it for a little while, but native species.
Okay. That's all I have for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Tim, do you have any questions on landscape architect?
Mr. Chair, could I just interrupt and ask Bev to promote Cliff Bomer from the attendee list? Sorry.
Absolutely.
But again, with the screen, it's
Bev,
impossible.
Bev, if you put your cursor, never mind. There we go. Mr. Chair, I didn't have any. Well, I had one question. I know we had talked about and I think Mr. Bomer had mentioned this. The trees in the parking lot versus there was a rain garden treatment in an earlier iteration. I just want to. We talked about the tulip trees on the street. What types of trees are we proposing for those parking lot pits?
Sure, those are Gladitia triacanthos. They're thornless honey locust. They turn yellow in the fall, and they're very urban hardy. Used a lot around everywhere.
Yeah, no, very familiar. Actually, I was looking at the preliminary results of Boston's tree inventory, and I was kind of shocked at how many honey locusts we have. It's like the tree in town, and now I can't stop seeing them. So very familiar. It's a good tree. I don't know if the board is still kind of wrestling with that issue of trees versus rain garden, and I guess I would maybe ask the applicant's engineer or Mr. Reardon, who I don't think was around for the last discussion that we had, if that rain garden was kind of a crucial element of the kind of the stormwater plan, or if it was more kind of a nice thing that we wanted that could sort of be changed if tastes changed. So that's kind of the open question that I wanted to put to folks that were here.
Yeah, I think it makes sense more the way we have it now than to have a rain garden there, to be honest. The rain garden was part of an initial discussion with Conservation Commission, but given the topography and the site layout, I think what we have now is definitely the best way to move forward.
Yeah, and I'd concur on that, particularly because we moved from a large underground detention basin to now a surface basin, which in effect functions similarly to a rain garden, and it's more proximate to the water body. So I think it makes a lot more intuitive sense now.
Okay, great. I just wanted to sort of tie up that loose end. And then, to Mr. Connolly's kind of question earlier about that detention area, that strikes me as a design challenge that is kind of easily solvable if there's sort of a kind of entry kind of treatment that maybe not necessarily is indicated on this plan, whether you reuse some of that granite or some type of a fence or something nice that just really sort of, makes it very clear this is the entrance to to this area. I think that kind of would go a long way. I don't have any particular recommendations here. Maybe not something like this, but which you can't see me making a hand motion. I'm very silly right now. I'm done talking. Those are the end of my comments. I can see myself, but no one else can see me. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna go mute now.
Okay, thank you, Tim. We can see you, or at least I see you very.
I do too.
Let me just ask Cliff Bomer if you have a telephonic connection with us, whether you, even though we can't update you, did you have any questions regarding landscape architecture that or comments that you want to make?
No, I don't. For me, the success of this project from early on had to do with tying in the landscape with the kind of feeling of the Parkway, integrating trees deeper into the site, moving the building over some to create some buffering space, and having usable open space on the site. So for me, it's come a long ways and is in good shape.
Well, great. I'm glad you could join us tonight, Mr. Ballmer. It's good to have you here. Let's, Mr. Brodsky, I think well, I should ask just for the record, Bev, is there any member of the public present who has their hands up and wants to ask a question on landscape architecture?
No,
Okay, so there's no public member that wants to weigh in. Mr. Brodsky, where do you want to go from here?
Mr. Leonard, we have no additional information to present this evening. It is our hope that the board can give us a sense of their approval or disapproval of the project, because we would then turn to completing our list of waivers if this design is acceptable to you, and we're prepared to work with Ms. Barrett on proposed conditions. So it would be helpful if we got a sense from the board this evening.
Let me ask Ms. Barrett, lest we overstep our bounds here. Is that an appropriate issue?
I think a thumbs up, would probably be helpful to the applicant. What we're trying to get to, if we can, is the final list of waivers that could be in front of the board well in advance of the next hearing. But then also, because if they have a thumbs up, then I think I sort of have a thumbs up too. And I think what I would then be working on is maybe a draft of some conditions of approval that I would share with Tim, so that the town staff have a chance to weigh in, share with Attorney Brodsky, so we can hopefully have in front of the board for the next hearing both the final waivers, which you would need to vote on, but then also conditions you can review.
Okay.
So, sometimes those go in sequence, but I think this project's come so far, and I'm not hearing alarms anymore, that I think maybe, we can try to accomplish a lot at the next meeting.
Thank you for your advice. I appreciate that. And based upon your experience, which we value immensely here. So let's go around the board and see if we can briefly not get overly involved in the detail, but in a general sense, as Ms. Barrett puts it, do we have a thumbs up on this project or not? And if you want to make some preliminary comments, that'd be welcome. So Mrs. Virginia Donahue King, do you want to be very briefully heard? And
yeah, very briefly. I like the direction that this has gone into, and I think this will make a better plan than what we were initially looking at. I really do want to hear what the fire chief says about widths of access, being able to get around the corners and so forth to the back area, and that is going to give his department full access for what they will need to do to, keep the safety of the residents at hand. That's the main thing that I want to know about, because I know it's going to be bigger than it looks on some of these plans, but the plans, there's some sharp corners that I don't have the wherewithal to figure out if that's enough for the fire trucks and equipment that we have. So I'd like to hear from the fire chief on this.
okay, thank you, Virginia. Mr. Brian Conley, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, I think this project's come along great and been very responsive to the peer review comments, to the the feedback the board's given. So to Sean, to ask you, in your peer review letter, you noted some details that have to get updated, but my sense was, well, is there anything you think that's open in terms of the deliverables you're asking for from the developer that are going to change the design of the building, other than maybe widening the northern driveway pinch point? Is there anything else that you think is open that that would impact the waivers that have to be identified?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it didn't seem to me either. So I mean, it seems to me, from our civil engineering peer review experts, satisfied and without any material reservations left, right? Some details that seem like will be forthcoming, and from Mr. Bomer, our architectural peer review expert, I don't think I heard any reservations or outgoing requests. So I guess I should ask Mr. Bomer, is there anything left that you're still withholding judgment on, or that is not yet responsive in terms of the design that we should consider before identifying if we're at a point to confirm waivers?
No, I was fine after the last revision of the building. And as I said, for me, it makes it even better that they've continued to develop the site plan. So I think the building is in a good place too. I appreciate the comment that these will look bigger in real life once it's built. It's bigger, but I think we carefully looked at the mitigation strategies for the massing of the building. And I think that it was the right decision to orient the building the way it is and put the parking where it is. And I think they've done a better job with introducing more significant landscaping in the parking. So no, I'm in a good place with it.
Great. So,
Brian,
thank you.
Brian,
Yep.
Sorry, if I could add, I think
Sure.
the net result for me is it's just the layout is a lot more efficient and just intuitively understandable. So, just everything's just works better.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way watching how it's evolved. I mean, I think the plans have come a long way too. I think for someone like me that's not an expert like you and Cliff, I feel like I understand it a lot better, right? And I think it's, look at the plans, can understand it and can see a lot of the progress and improvements that have been made. So I think it's, I think the process is working, and it's seems like it's coming toward its end. So nothing further from me, Mr. Chair.
Great, Mr. Connolly. I'll try to be as brief as I can. Sometimes I go off too much, but my view of this, if Mr. Brodsky is looking for a thumbs up, I may not be able to do that. I think it deserves a double thumbs up. I think this type of process is torturous. I think it should be reformed. I feel sorry for the applicant, Mr. Bosworth, and having to go through these multiple hearings. But I do understand that some hearings are necessary. I'm not sure this application required this number of hearings, but I think on all sides here, from Mr. Brodsky to all of your expert witnesses and to the peer reviewers for the town and for Judy Barrett, everyone has performed in utmost good faith and patience. And I think even to the uninitiated, and I put my hand up there, this project is at least 500% better than the original design. And I think that it's a tribute to all of the professionals here, that it shows what can be done if everyone has great respect for each other and participates in good faith to benefit the project. So I say double thumbs up on this one. I think it's going to be a terrific addition to the town of Milton. And I think all of those comments are evidence that all of the abutters and the residents who live in this section of the town, if they don't affirmatively endorse this application, there's nobody who objects to it. And I'm sure if you put it to a poll, you'd get a lot of people who prefer not to get personally involved, but endorse this as a fantastic use of this particular property that's going to benefit everybody. So those are my thoughts, and I think that Judy Barrett has been terrific here. Her interplay with the experts has been very, very helpful, and I think she'll be helpful to guide us to get this project finally resolved and on its way towards construction. So those are my comments. So are they satisfactory to you, Mr. Brodsky?
More than satisfactory. Thank you, everyone. This is exactly what we needed to hear.
So I guess the next question is going to be the date of the next hearing. And
I think we're looking at, excuse me, the 2 weeks from now, Mr. Chair. East Milton is next week, so I believe we're looking at July 22nd.
okay.
Mr. Brodsky, does that give you enough time to get the final waiver list pulled together?
Yes, Ms. Barrett.
Okay, super.
Let me just ask my fellow board members, Mrs. King and Mr. Conley, is July 22nd available for your busy schedules?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. It's fine with me as well. So do we have anything further to discuss at this public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, it's Charlie Bosworth. I'd like to thank the board for all their efforts, and especially Beverly for putting up with all of the transmittals going back and forth, and Judy especially. And certainly Cliff and Sean were extremely helpful in guiding the project to the end where it is now. And in a time that it could have been very difficult and easy for them to brush us off and not meet, they always picked up the phone, always were helpful, and we wanted to extend our appreciation for those efforts.
Great, thanks for your comment, Mr. Bosworth. I know the board endorses those comments as well. So if we have nothing further to come before the board, we have a motion to adjourn this hearing until July 22nd, 2021 at 7 p.m. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's unanimous. So why don't we see everybody on the 22nd at 7 o'clock in the evening? And if you certainly can be in touch with Judy, and I'm sure Judy will be in touch with you, and we can see if we can put this all together and make some progress, if not finalize this matter on the 22nd. I just urge everyone to be safe. Tomorrow, it sounds like it's going to be very treacherous and difficult. So stay dry and stay safe, and we'll see you on the 22nd.
Thanks
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Okay.
All right.
Good night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Ready?